And obviously the truck is squatted very significantly. What is going on today, guys? My name's Alex. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are with the beautiful Power Wagon once again, and we are going to talk about payload numbers for this Power Wagon. Now, as many of you guys know, the Power Wagon is lacking when it comes to payload as well as towing numbers for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the suspension. It's a lighter duty suspension to give you that off-road performance, as well as the height of the vehicle, the sway bars, and the Articulink lower control arms here. All of those come into play when the rating of this truck happens, therefore giving you much lower numbers in comparison to a regular Ram 2500. Now, last week I decided to max out the payload of this truck. I believe it was 1,483 pounds on the sticker. And I was surprised how well the truck did, because when I maxed out my Ram 1500, the rear axle was literally sitting on the bump stops, and that was kind of not impressive. So this truck had about 1.5 inches of room before the rear axle was sitting on the bump stops. So I figured today we would really max out this truck and give her a run for its money. We got 5 220 liter barrels, or 55 gallon barrels for you Americans. We are gonna weigh this thing up to just about 2,400 pounds and see if the Power Wagon can take it, and see how that rear axle looks when she's all loaded up. So my plan is to fill each barrel up. 220 liters is 220 kilograms, which is roughly 485 pounds. And we can just do one barrel at a time, see how much that sags the truck, and hopefully be able to put all 5 full barrels in the back and see what the suspension is doing, and whether or not I would feel safe driving this truck with 2,400 pounds in it. So obviously I'd love to have the truck over the pit, but this coach is down for the moment. So we'll just do it in this bay over here. Got the old handy dandy skateboard, the creeper. So we'll take a look at the rear axle with no weight on it, just to see how much room we have between the bump stop and the axle. All right, wonderful. So, yeah, get me under here. So it is the Power Wagon, so it has quite a long suspension travel just for that off-road use. Now I am gonna call that 4.5, maybe 5 inches there. You know, if it was my girlfriend, that'd be 7 inches. But no, I'd say that's about 4.5 inches, 5 inches of play there, and we'll start from there. Now, like I mentioned in my last video, the coils here take up basically all the weight from the load. The shocks really don't take up much load. They more or less just help control the axle when the spring bounces up and down. Let's get our first barrel up there. Let's fill her up and continue on. All right, so we have 2 full barrels in the back of the truck. It's about 940-ish pounds. Let's get under there. Let's see what's going on with the rear axle. All right, so with about 1,000 pounds of weight, we got maybe about 3 inches still of clearance here between our bump stop and the rear axle. Still plenty of room in my opinion, so we will continue. The coils do look like they've compressed a little bit, but that's to be expected. As we wait for these barrels to fill up, if you guys are unsure what your actual payload rating is for your specific truck, it's very simple. It should be right on your driver's side door, right on this sticker right here. And each truck is different. It all depends on, you know, the total weight of your truck when it rolls off the factory line, and different options obviously weigh different amounts. So that's kind of where your payload number comes from. Now, the reason why I'm very confident in loading up this truck more than what the rated payload number is because besides the suspension and the sway bars, everything else on this truck is basically the same as a standard 2500. Like I mentioned in the last video, this truck comes with a full floating axle in comparison to your semi-floating axle on a Ram 1500. The frame is the exact same on a 2500. The box is the same. The brakes are upgraded from your 1500. And I feel like a lot of people compare Power Wagon numbers to a Ram 1500. And on paper, yes, it is a very fair comparison. And at times, a Ram 1500 will have higher payload numbers and higher towing numbers. However, in reality, I would feel much more confident towing heavy numbers with this truck and putting heavy payload in the back with this truck versus a Ram 1500. So we got 4 barrels up there. It's about 1,950 pounds or just about 500 pounds over the max payload of this truck. So we're about 500 pounds overweight. As you guys can see, the rear is really starting to sag and the front is actually starting to pop up quite a bit. As you can see, the coil is really starting to be compressed. But would you look at that? We are not bottomed out. In fact, that is a conservative inch there, probably closer to 3/4 of an inch before the bump stop hits the axle. So technically, the axle is not completely maxed out yet. So some of you guys may be wondering why I'm kind of obsessed with having the bump stops touch the axle or seeing how much weight it'll take to do that. It's because with my Ram 1500, I actually loaded it up to the max spec payload and the axle stops were touching the axle, basically meaning that the axle was maxed out and there was no suspension travel. Now, obviously, like we just saw, there's only about 3/4 of an inch, but that is still more than my Ram 1500 in spec versus this Power Wagon being 500 pounds over spec and still having more suspension travel, which to me is kind of interesting. We will get this last barrel up here and we'll add that last 485 pounds. So there we have it. We have 2,400 pounds in the bed of this Power Wagon. The rear is totally sagged, and the front is starting to pop up. We'll have to get a tape measure at the back and see how far that's dropped. But first, let's see how this thing drives just out in the parking lot. Obviously, I'm not gonna be taking this thing on the road, but I just figure I'd give you guys a quick look on how this thing handles when driving around the parking lot. So those little clips you just saw, with me sitting in the truck, that's 2,600 pounds of payload, roughly, 1,200 pounds more than the rated payload. And obviously the truck is squatted very significantly, but just driving around there, if I had these things strapped down, I don't think I would feel too bad driving it. I mean, it just felt normal. I don't know. All right, we got the old Milwaukee. We'll give her a quick measure here, see how far this rear axle has actually squatted. Wow. Okay, this thing squatted a fair bit. So normally we're up at 44 inches to the top of the fender. Now we are at 39.25, let's say. So almost 5 inches of drop here, which is quite a bit of drop. And underneath the truck here, look at that. We are still not bottomed out on this axle. The bump stop still has about 1/4 inch of room before she is touching the top of the axle. Very impressive. So we now have a baseline for the Power Wagon, 2,500 pounds. You're pretty much maxing out the rear suspension. So we'll keep those numbers in a special place when we test out other pickup trucks in this similar fashion. Well, there you guys go. The Power Wagon is a tough little girl. Basically maxing out the rear axle around 2,400 pounds, basically 1,000 pounds over the actual rated max payload, which is kind of impressive. Would I drive around the streets like that? Probably not. You're probably gonna break something, but if you had to load it up, I think you'd be okay. So when I bring in other trucks like a Ram 1500, a Ram 2500, we can really see and compare the payload numbers, first of all on paper, and actually in the real world, what the rear suspension's doing and all of that fun stuff. So lots of cool videos ahead with these barrels here, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Now, as we get into spring, I'm really hoping to get my hands on a trailer and we can actually put some weight in a trailer and see the max towing of this truck. So that should be fun. Looking forward to that. But anyways, guys, that's enough of me. If you guys like the video, don't forget to leave that thumbs up. And if you like cool stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe. We'd love to have you guys on board. Anyways, we'll see you in the next freaking video.